I woke up and stared at the wall opposite me. I did not know how I'd make it to breakfast. I did not know how I'd make it to lunch. And the idea of making it to sundown seemed almost impossible. This was my life. This had been my life for a year and a half, ever since I'd lost the person most important to me. But on this particular morning, when I woke, I realized that I had to make a decision. Either I wasn't going to last much longer, or I would have to do something to jolt myself out of the terrible space I was in. I knew that if I did something, it would have to push all my boundaries and take me right out of the comfort zone. I'd found walking to be a very meditative and powerful force. And so right there and then I decided, I'm going to walk from Cape Town to Port Elizabeth along the coast. And if I fall off a cliff or I'm eaten by a shark, that's a bonus. So I began planning. But then the strangest thing happened. As I planned, I discovered that I didn't want to die. But this brought up an unexpected problem. This meant that I had to deal with an entity called fear. And I quickly realized that if I had any fear at all while I was walking, it would be one long, torturous event. So my focus became getting rid of fear. I didn't know if that was possible, but I knew that I had to try. The first thing I did was I stopped reading newspapers, stopped watching television, and very quickly learned to stop telling friends about my idea, because the first reaction was, you are going to die, followed usually by a heartwarming description of the other things that were going to happen to me. So I stopped talking to people, but I spoke a lot to myself. And day after day, it felt like I was actually physically changing my mindset, changing the patterns of my brain. I decided that fear was a useless emotion, and that if you have to give into fear, you're giving all your power away. But most of all, I developed a theory that said that the less you fear, the safer you are. I didn't know if the theory was correct, but I decided to believe in it anyway, because to be quite honest, I didn't have a choice. Going back a little, while I was still being influenced by other people, I decided one day to have a little bit of a research on a thing called the taser, which somebody had told me about. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know much about it, and I thought maybe if I did some research, I might see if it was viable to walk with it. The strangest thing happened. As I started opening up on the internet, it actually felt like the air around me physically changed. Now, this is very odd because I'm a pretty scientific kind of person. I don't go in for crystal slinging and all of that. But literally, the air changed. All I can describe it as is that the air around me turned from light to heavy. It turned from positive to negative. And the change was so dramatic that I immediately closed down the computer and I didn't go there again. And I now know, without any question, without any doubt, that the entire journey would have been completely different on every level had I been carrying a weapon. As far as practicalities were concerned, I had to work right up to the last minute. I also had to sleep on people's couches, which meant that I had to give away all ideas of security, and that was actually a huge gift. And I started walking on the 4th of April, 2012, against a howling gale, with no walking partner, with no backup system, with no weapon, with a pack that was way too heavy for me. And I walked as a woman on my own, slept in the bush and on the beaches, and for 123 days, I had no fear. It seemed almost impossible to me. It was unbelievable. Something that had started as an exercise in mind control took on an energy of its own, when on day one I actually felt myself let go completely. And the liberation was astonishing. By the end of day one, however, I had pains in places that I not thought possible. And after 2 weeks of unbelievable discomfort, I just decided I'm going to throw out half of everything that I have. And this included most of my clothes, so I went the rest of the way in one pair of walking pants, and dirt and sweat became very close friends. I also decided to throw out anything that I hadn't used in the first 2 weeks. That included my knife, which I thought was too heavy. I had a pair of scissors, but not a knife. And men find this amazing, that I walked the rest of the way without a knife. When I left, I also set myself 3 main rules. I decided to be very strict about keeping to these rules. Rule number 1 was that I would never pay for accommodation. This meant that I would always sleep most of the time in the bush or in the dunes in a yellow plastic bag, unless it got really cold, and then I put up my little tent. What was interesting was that if I was in the middle of a forest or a bush in the middle of the night and I heard strange sounds, it was amazing to note how fear wanted to make an appearance, but I wouldn't allow it. And I was able to let go quick enough to actually go back to sleep. And even if I hadn't identified the sound, I was able to let go. The second rule was that I wouldn't ask for anything. So this meant that if anyone gave me something, it would be purely a voluntary gesture. It wouldn't be because I'd asked. And I have to say that I was quite simply blown away by the South African public. The warmth that I got from people on a daily basis when I came in contact with people was astounding. I was given countless meals, countless drinks, hot showers, which was like a trip to paradise. Beds to sleep in sometimes. People even did my laundry, all without me ever asking. And I can truly say I fell in love with my country all over again. Rule number 3 was that I would never accept a lift. This meant that if somebody offered me a place to stay for the night and they wanted to drive me there, then I would insist on going back to the exact same spot the next day to carry on walking. I expected the journey to take 3 months, sticking as close as I could to the sea the whole way. But I didn't know how rough and rugged the terrain would become further on. And after I was caught in the floods of last year, I found myself crawling under many fallen trees, wading through thick mud, following gorges all the way back, sometimes for days, to where I could cross the river and then push my way up through the bush to get back to the sea again. So this slowed me down by a month. But I let go of time, and so I was liberated from that. Sometimes I'd find myself shuffling along some little ledge somewhere with this heavy weight on my back and the sea crashing behind me in slip-slops because the boots were too difficult on my blisters. And I'd become very aware at that moment that if I put a foot wrong, this could be the end. I was very surprised to find that I felt more alive than I'd ever felt in my life before. So I experienced exhaustion and cold, extreme cold near the end, because for the last 2 months I would often wake up throughout the night from cold. I had all the wrong equipment. And pain and blisters and hunger. And yet the entire time I found that I was inconceivably happy. And this was incredibly strange to me, to discover that happiness is sometimes found further away than you would ever thought possible from the comfort zone. And it wasn't just that I was surrounded by incredible beauty, which I was on a daily basis. It wasn't just that I was connecting with nature in a way that I had never done before. I was connecting with myself again and my own power, and I was healing. And that every day was a spiritual experience, which it was. But it was that I was experiencing life in a very stripped down and simple form. I was experiencing the edge. And the edge is a timeless place. There's no present, there's no future and there's no past, there's only present. It's unpredictable. There are no safety nets. Everything around you is heightened. And you really feel what it is to be alive. So on the 4th of August, 2012, I stopped walking, exactly 4 months after I'd started. And although tired, I didn't actually want to stop. And now I know I never will. I'm already planning future walks in foreign countries. But I had to come back to normal life for a while. And that wasn't easy, because normal life, the normal life, the way we see it, is not actually normal at all. The way most of us live, we live at such a high speed that we never connect with the present. We often are not living with awareness. We make way too many decisions based on fear. And we tend to shy away from the edges, even though we suspect that by jumping off the edge, we might find out who we truly are. Also, while walking, I discovered and was made very aware of how much fear we live with as a country. The number of fences that I had to climb under, climb over, and get electrocuted by between here and there can attest to that. The media usually focuses on the negative, but we empower the negative by concentrating on it and then spreading the fear around to one another like a disease. Our country is not what we see in the news. That is a tiny part, and it's exaggerated for dramatic effect. Our country is a place of warmth and tenacity and humor and love. I'm not even vaguely the same person I was when I started walking. I live way more in the present than I ever did before. I'm not attached to material things. I'm not resistant to change. Have even less care about security, and I want my life in future to be about adventure and experience. And I discovered that you can walk away from pain. Life is a choice. You can choose to see beauty. You can choose to appreciate the things around you, especially the simplest things. And you can choose to let go of fear. And the best way to kickstart all of these choices is to step out of the comfort zone. To live without fear is true freedom. Thank you.